lieutenants coming in behind this. Well, they just finished the 100th mission. Actually, they got cycled through to go back up to rescue one of our other pilots that was shot down earlier. So they've just got 101 special. And we're real proud of them because, first of all, not many lieutenants fly the 105. And secondly, to get 100 missions in it is outstanding, we think. So we're going to meet them here at the end of the runway and take them on up to the parking space, give them a bottle of champagne, and I imagine they're 3 happy boys.
When all is said and done, you really cannot adequately relate a war. War is too potent, too personal. War is living and laughing and crying and dying. It has always been the man who fights who can best report a war, if he will. True, his story may be confused, sometimes harsh, sometimes boisterously non-committal, but it is real. This is one segment, one small insight into our present war. This is the 105 story. The story of fighter-bomber pilots flying daily over the armed camp of North Vietnam during the month of November in 1966. These are the men of the 388 Tactical Fighter Wing, and in particular, the men of the 421st Fighting Cavalier Squadron.
Well, what are they doing? He said, well, how do I tell if they're friendly? I said, well, they come up with their hands over their hands, they'll be friendly. He said, no, one of these guys got a gun. The guy said, well, how far are you from them? He said, well, it's standing right here by me. He said, well, it must be friendly. I feel I'm behind it. Well, I better go kill myself on this, so you are true. Please. Okay. They didn't know where he was for a while, and then they saw a Lordy D there, and they said, all right, that's 2 minutes, let's go off the radio. I'm going to be an instructor pilot. We're 238 Williams Air Force Base, so I figure I'll arrive there, and I'll be real quiet, all that, and I'll go in, and all the students will nudge each other, and when they meet me, and I'll be their instructor, and they'll fly with me, and they'll nudge each other and say, what did Lieutenant Rasmus do before he came here? And they'll be all quiet, no one will know until finally there'll be graduation, and we'll show up in mess dress, and there I'll be with my hair medals and my DFC, and my Silver Star, and my Commendation Medal, and my Vietnam Service Medal, and all this stuff all the way across, and I'll walk in with a slight limp, and they'll say, tell me about it. And I'll say, oh, it was nothing, it was nothing. But then for a week after, every time I call in the airplane, it's like, I'll pull my leg in, and I'll wince a little, and I'll say, what is it? I'll say, oh, it's just an old war injury. 45, 44. Right, 45, 44, 45. How did this one go? Very good? Yeah, good. How is that? Well, it's 42, 43. Okay. Go to the house. One little, one color, one for the month. Finally made the board. 99 hard ones to go. You're going to do something. I got to put I got to number 90. You already got it. So you're going to get Tuesday, huh? One month I'll be able to make it work. Always be able to go there. We'll go here about 6 months in Africa, about 6 months for the tour. We'll get 2 more people about that. What's that? 26 hours without Christmas shopping back for you back. Now you really got that one. Oh, can't only work. We have 4 people look like finish up by the end of their life. They should be going to their families for Christmas. Think you're gonna make home for Christmas?
Yeah.
67. This wing, even though we are roughly 100 miles from any sort of civilization, morale is high here. I've noticed that. The men know what they're doing and why they're here. Well, if we still have to be over here, I'll come right back and go eat us. You come right back and do another hit. You bet I will. Well, I feel we have a reason to be here. As you read specialization, I feel that we didn't take some measures that were here. We've been fighting in our backyard. Enjoy some of the things I'm over here for. Such as the American way of life. I served in World War II in the Southwest Pacific. Served during Korea. Well, when I leave here, I still have some time to do it, sir. I'll make it a tour.
We don't have a morale problem. Here we sit out here in the middle of a strange country and away from everything that's familiar to us. And I'm not speaking of pilots now, I'm talking to the maintenance people. But there is no morale problem. Of course, the pilots couldn't have a morale problem. There's always something going. There's always something going. It's never dull. If there is a factor involved with a morale problem, it's fatigue.
Yes, I personally try to discourage it. Man has put in 100 missions to go in North Vietnam, go home, get a rest, and come back. However, I have one pilot here that's just insistent on taking another 100. And he's here, his name is Lieutenant Victor.
Yeah, I want to come back down. How come you get to stay here?
Hey, work hard, he's going to stay here with me.
Yeah, Mommy wouldn't have had any part to do with that.
Okay, there's the deal, you know. You're very, let's face it, you know, if you like somebody well enough to be married with them, you know, you don't want to be away from them for a year or 8 months or anything like that. How are you going to explain to a wife that you have put in for a concurrent tour, you know, that you're going to take flying over her? It wouldn't happen. So like, wait, it's like, you're doing this. That's why I'm sticking around. You know, if that's where I got nothing going for me back in the States, and the flying's good. You don't have all the little nitpicking rules, regulations you have to put up with, especially in 2 months ago. Still a lot better than it is back there now. But I just, you know, I enjoy it. And it's the kind of deal like everybody says, you know, waving a flag, but I'm not. But at the same time, you know, where are you gonna stop it at, you know? Where's colonies are you gonna wave where in the Philippines or in Australia or San Francisco or Des Moines, Iowa? You know, you can stop it here or wait till somewhere later on. I don't think most of the people think like that. They're like me, you know. What happens, you know, if I get shot down? To me, that never did me anyway.
Hey, at least you were pretty mean till you shaved your mustache.
Yeah. I couldn't stand that anymore. Our bombing objectives, I believe, can be very distinctly divided into 2 phases. Our interdiction program conducted in the southern portion of North Vietnam in an attempt to deny movement of the enemy into South Vietnam, and our strategic, if you will, objectives in the northern portion of North Vietnam in terms of attacking principal lines of communications, the Northeast and the Northwest railroads, which comprise the 2 most major railroads in North Vietnam, also POL installations and other military supply and storage areas located in the delta regions of North Vietnam. Finished that flight here that's getting ready to make the angle to take off. It's We've got over 50 airplanes involved in this strike force, and it was going to be a big raid up near the Hanoi area, but the weather's bad. Now they're going to various other areas. A spare job, for every 4 airplanes we launch one spare off the end of the runway. In case one of the airplanes that we're having trouble with, they can fill in any 4 position, any one of the 4 positions. He's usually a leader, so in case the leader aborts, he can fill in that spot. You see this flight taking off now, and the airplane standing by is the spare. He'll be coming back up like these probably pretty soon. Spare's not a bad job because you do want quite a bit of time. We like to time like before. That's why we have a spare out there, because if we didn't, we'd never get another airplane up in time. $255 that way. I took it by him. It probably was about $250 or so. God might send his tired things. Where? I'm paying $500. Oh, then I thought I saw something funny down there. I didn't see it. They had it. Yeah, Bob, we didn't. They didn't. I didn't. No, I got a nice big bridge there. 2%. I was carrying about 2% back. And when that guy kept calling next, and we hadn't caught up with that flight in front of us yet, then, and I still was going full blow rate about 620 degrees. Yeah. This is not the answer. Don't worry, I was watching your 6 flight. Thanks a lot. I call your favorite game. I was watching it too. When I was on my run, that's why I saw all the sparking coming from. All the spike flashes were coming from right around where you got the bump. So we came right into this area right here. We're Route 6. That's the real point. Well, where were we like where was that flight that was calling out all the things? That wasn't a flight that was calling me. That was some guy. That's the 121 that sits out over the Upscaled. There was somebody up there saying, drop, along that road to this, that, and the other. Some guy was saying, there's a signal over there. There goes, yeah, but they were all identified as friendmen. I saw one, yeah. There was a gaggle of airplanes up in there, I'll tell you. Right, they were all over. To me, like, before we got there, the guys actually saw it. They were calling them out. 4 squadrons in it. They are all located up here in the, I'll call a quadrangle. The 469th here on your right, fighting both. The left here, 421st, the 34th, and the 13th.
Spot 26, aircraft 148 marks the beginning of a 421st Tactical Fighter Squadron area, at which I spend most of my time. They have 20 aircraft assigned to the outfit. As you can see, they're all painted up in different ways. The primary identification feature is the red GCA deflector on the nose gear strut. As a matter of the 105 and my particular acquaintance of the doggone thing, first associations, I guess, from a number of years back, I could care less about the airplane. I didn't think it was ever made to fly, and it certainly, from a maintenance standpoint, wasn't very reliable. So these days I have finished my mind. On the left here is age. That's ground support equipment. We have about 300 pieces of it here. It's worth $6 million. The 105 is a very complicated weapon system. It's got radar, gun sights, electronics, all sorts of complicated electronic equipment in it. This equipment here supports the operation of the 105. This is thinking back at the complication of this weapon system. You like to know that it takes 40 man-hours of maintenance people to support 1 hour of this airplane in the air. That's how complicated it is. However, it's the best airplane in the airports over here today to do the job. This flight line at night is a pretty active place. There's more work done at night actually than there is in the daytime. The daytime is completely taken off with launching and recovering airplane. That's time. And of course there's a turnaround. There's a lot of bomb loading for the second go around noon, but nothing like that night. Put it on one airplane, it doesn't come in place, you have to take it off and put it on another one. Pretty frustrating. They get it done somehow. I don't know how, but they do. We have a remarkable delivery rate here. I can't remember the last time I got a maintenance non-delivery. We're always getting it. They do a real bang-up job that time. They said sports shirts, not sporty shirts. Over there, front. You know what? Oh, thank you. Well, I'll be nice. No, I'm getting on me. I'll probably go around and take everybody's answer. We've got 10. My sister. Oh, come on. Laura Roper. Or if I go to Comcast. I would do that.
I no care. My love waits there. In San Francisco, beyond the blue and windy sea, when I come home to you, San Francisco, your golden sun
everybody remembers most, that's where the adrenaline starts pumping. Well, the airplane's working hard, you got the tanker, except the go, will make you going. That's your last chance. The first flight goes through the tanker, we stay with them. There'll be 4 flights on the tanker. And everybody will go to the tanker and fill up. It takes 6 days out of the time. And you stay with, and you stay where, after everybody gets full, you explore. And then they walk to your drop-off point. And in the route from the anchor, your drop-off point, you go to the top up. And it takes 1,500, 2,000, 2,500 pounds. The point is that you can get 4 airplanes through a top-off to, and that's it takes a couple of minutes per airplane. But it's below a racial basic route, you like, well, it takes quite some time. So consequently, if you couldn't pull flights on the tanker and expand immediately, you get to the drop-off point where the tanker has to turn back before you get to spend flight full. Plus the other argument there, that everybody leaves full, or close to full. A lot of our was to observe what's going on around, what they're moving, where they're moving, to how it bridges, what kind of condition they're in. So we do need to allow area where the cloud cover is. And I'm not where the sun environment is heavy. You can't operate in so around cumulus buildups where you're going around the clouds because the sun will come right straight through them and hit you. And incidentally, the airplanes we have lost to sand been in these conditions. So we have to avoid them. Well, maybe not. I still have light speed though. I want to tell you, I got water right away all the time, so yeah, I got light speed plus stuff. You right? Remember what the weather was when we listened to talks of it? I think we were reporting about 10,000. Yeah, we went through a layer at 10,000, and then it was about from 10 to 9, and then from 9, the ground in areas that were clear, but there was a scattered layer in there about 5 or 6. Yeah. Back to the 3 on there, that's what I yes, this is 24. Sorry, we lost 2 today. Okay, this 1, 2, 24, 1 is 25. Okay. Now this is the CBU flight. This is what's the second flight? Where are you waiting on? Start still tagging. And then drive up there slow so you hit the red. And then so you have to start thinking about the rails and the drive. Everything, so we're going to get right on down to our TOT point. It doesn't work out quickly except the weather. The water indicates a small high pressure area centered just about over Hanoi, which should make for fairly good weather except for restricted visibilities and haze. Talk to listeners, don't be there. Weather on program tomorrow, the last 5 minutes into the target. You start to west, just to the northwest and west. This might be the real pretty quarter. So we'll do it the same way. Yeah, if everything works the same way tomorrow, we'll get it. If the weather breaks, yeah. That's the way it goes. So tomorrow's target is the Long Bend Railroad. It's the largest railroad in all of North Vietnam. Function controls all the traffic coming in from the Northeast Railroad and the Northwest Railroad into Hanoi. Then controls all traffic going south. It's located 5 nautical miles north of Hanoi. Defenses include a heavy concentration of AAA, and there are 26 known SAM sites in the area. Roscoe was brought here by a pilot from Kadena, who was temporarily assigned to the wing. When the pilot was shot down up north, Roscoe sort of became everybody's dog. The only dog who out on dates. Now Roscoe's a free agent, goes everywhere. Sort of a tramp with a big heart. But lots of guys, for instance, don't feel right unless he's sitting there in a commander's chair during the mission briefing. They say if he sleeps, it's going to be an easy mission. If his ears perk up, watch out. Yeah. The winds there from the surface to 5,000 feet along the coast are going to run about 25 knots out of the northeast. Get out of an aircraft report right over the mountain there this morning, just about at McGee Pass at 5,000 feet, he had a wind of 030 at 40 knots. Nobody dare say anything against the 105. And then you hear stories and wild tales and so forth, and Well, I learned to love this old bird. It really does a job. And there's not another airplane that we've got that can do this. Very successfully. Very successful. Pilots love the airplane. They love the speed, the power. We'll get there and get you out. We hear an awful lot about surface-to-air missiles. They're called SAMs, or referred to as SA-2s. This is a picture of an SA-2 site situated in the immediate Hanoi area. A close-up of this particular target would look something like this. Very clearly, you can observe the presence of SA-2 missiles. And in this area, we find the radar van which controls the firing of the missiles and also tracks the aircraft along with providing guidance to the SA-2 missile. Our pilots are constantly faced in flying in North Vietnam with missile firings along with extremely heavy anti-aircraft. I kind of call it the dry throat mission myself. Usually I come out bound for the target and I'm just kind of sucking that water bottle dry throat. But the only thing I can really say about the Hanoi area is about the time you start coming off the tanker on the way up there, you begin getting butterflies in your stomach naturally, and then you begin settling down to the task at hand of navigating and finding your way up there. And then once you arrive in the area, you're generally pretty busy, and although at times you're pretty scared when you have to roll in on something up there, especially when you look down and see nothing but a black cloud or a white cloud down below you. It's about as scary a mission as I've ever been on. I think it tries you to just about the maximum on the missions. If you can get between a ridge between you and that radar site, they can't guide missiles. It's just when you get down in the Gulf in the flat line, it's a 30-mile ring around the city of Hanoi. It's a bear. Because it's flat, you have no protection, and I don't know how true it is, but it's the most heavily defended place in the history of aerial warfare. I've been there and I believe it. Everybody wear your flak belt today, guys. Everyone. Drop flak. Oh, they left it off. Try to wear your flak belt. I'm coming around how much in a much. I'm always the grand school. You don't want to go. There's no way. Right? No way. You got those flags you're going to tie between the wings? Or one on each? It's not a... What awesome about it, first of all, we have our boss is the radio, which is the most important item we have. Our second item, I would say, is flares. The third is your weapon, and the compass, and the mirror for sunlight, and find direction. The most important one, on blow out, is the beeper. I hear yours, too. Yeah. Who was that? Mom, we got? Oh, yeah. But, 20 bars, 30 bars. Who belongs to those 140? That's good. 140. Don't kick my purse out. Okay, I won't take your purse. Oh, yes. I don't know. just about the second wheel I have 4,500 pounds. Alright, I'm gonna hold two 4-barrel handles up the ramp. A little squat and a little bit out field. Well done it. Left, Eagle 4 check. Eagle flight, got a flag down, left side. Lead off right. Automatic weapon, right in there, front. Don't contact me, I'm lead about 35 miles per current point. I was very going to settle left turn, come over here, get so bad, get a little action right below me. Before you get the boat through at that point, I'm turning right now. Feel? Yeah. Going up the cloud. Ring of blind, we got a person low at 2. What was that for, Eagle? 12. Roger, I'm going that way top right. I see him loud and clear. You go, we got no blood under us, blood under us. Roger, let's go get it. Fucking dude, what's the front out there? Roger, I'm mixing it up with two partners. Okay, I'll do that. Let's go back. All right. Right here, the two strangers look like 105. Got it, 9 o'clock time. No sweat. Okay, this man Joe's got a contact down in the target area. Pull up about from the road and try to pump. Let me see. Get me lined up. Okay, keep that left. Okay. A little left, outbound. Outbound, she's gonna put flying on up. Okay. I'll do that. Run! Take the fire! Take the fire! Run! Take it down, take it down, Drew. Which way now? Go up the line, 11 o'clock. We can take it down. All right, get back there, take it down. 12 o'clock. I think we're all right for the time being. Go up, upscaled. Roger, I'm going. 2 quarters well, right out the foot.
Mr. McGill. There's three of them. They're shooting at us, too. So it's right up on that hill, right from the west side of the... Well, you know, right through the top of that hill, you'll be able to, you know, and you could let them go. I just pushed, and then I looked out towards the dog, see, that was through the line. 6,500 feet. 55 or something set on me. Short of the phone. So I didn't go ahead and push, and then, you know, you take that hill on your left right there and get that one. So, oh, there's another spot. Got another one, that's it. 51. And what? What the you know, part of the problem is over put down and go up and put those fuel oils out, that fuel oils out. Everybody wants to go to the side. What's that? What? So I go up this, well, I just try to put key on that. No. Against the wood, I about to 6 times and they put it and there's nothing to milk. Now I'll chill to go. How about let people? And who's going to win the argument? So. I ain't going to give them a shot at it. Well, that's right. We've been very successful here in taking pilots from SAC, ABC, training command, as long as they go to one of the tactical schools, and one of the 105 schools to take their command, back in the States and receive roughly 70 hours in the 105, they do a good job with it. Of course, we don't start them out as flight leaders. They start either the number 2 or 4 position, and they set their own rate of progress. Well, how does it feel? It's quite a cloud. Yeah, well, after not flying for a couple months, you feel good, Ed? We talk about it a little bit? Yeah. Did you understand what we were trying to do when he was doing the recce? How he was going back and forth on the road, and I was standing outside. That wasn't really what I was going to do. He was too far. You said, oh, you mean when I was, yeah. When you were wrecking the road? Yeah, I was trying to play a wing. Kind of like this one. Yeah, well, no, you press on, I'll still away from you. Yeah, there's no problem. But you see the position that you want. You don't want to get down like this because you're getting the flag. You stay up like this, and then when he disappears, you try to go high on. Then when he reverses, take a look out. See, every time you look out, you look right down there and see your wingman. That's what you want to do. When you go to the outside, you don't want to get too high because it turns into, that's what happened to me though. Yeah. It turned into me when I was high, and I just looked way too good. Don't get too high and don't get too low. When you get too low, if they shoot at him, and you're lower, they'll probably hit you. But at the same time, when you get too high, he turns into you just like that says you get it blocked out. I told you how complicated the weapon system is. So it only can be effectively operated, utilized against the enemy by supersonic. And our pilots are professional pilots. We do have a few youngsters out of the training school, but most of our pilots have been in the Air Force 10 to 12 years or longer. And in fact, we have some grandfathers who are fighting this war. The wrong to do that 13, 15. Out here, 15, 10, right. But we'd have enough fuel after leaving that tank to make so full run away. Let's look at the crowd. My best day was the 5th of July when I attacked and destroyed 4 SAM sites in one 25-minute mission. And this came about because in escorting the strike flights, 2 SAM sites came up on our way in. We had to attack these boys to turn them off the air to get into the target area. While in the target area, another SAM site came up, threatening the strike force, and of course we attacked and got him. And then on the way back out, another SAM site came up to block our exit out of the target area, which was about 15 or 20 miles north of Hanoi. And we only had 1 part of rockets and 20-millimeter cannon ammunition remaining. But he fired 2 SAMs at us, and we managed to acquire him visually and put the rockets on him and machine gun him out of commission. This was the best day I've had, and I don't care to go through another one of those. A little too much for an old man.
No way.
I've come up with one thing that, in my own mind, makes the Air Force a good organization. And was one of the reasons I stayed in it after I got out of the fighters. And that's the people that are in it. And I think this has been most vividly demonstrated to me over here. I don't think you can get more diversified type of an organization, people with diversified backgrounds. So we have some old heads from Korea, some young heads from the academy, and we got the world's greatest B-52 fighter pilot over there, Bob Loken, and a few other people from SAC, ADC, and 12th Air Force headquarters and things like that. And we made a pretty good organization. I think we kind of put the squadron, if we could tell it to the world, we put it on the map. And I'm very happy to serve with each and every one of you troops.
So if I could swing a deal to get down south with working 100s or F-5s or A1s or geez, I don't care as long as it's Gulf Air Support. If I can swing that, I'm going to just try to go maybe back to States TDY to upgrade down there. If not, I'll stick around and fly an 01 or an A1. Check you out right up north, you know.
You're about it with that like that.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
But, I've been going for 16 years. It's my job. As of right now, I've got 3 children. I've got a 6-year-old boy and a 11-year-old girl and a 17-year-old girl. So, just watching kids grow up. So, I don't care if they're not Vietnamese kids or South or whatever. I don't notice I ought to go find villages. Well, we're not children at all. I've been very careful not to do this stuff. I'm very careful. I think most pilots in the squadron are very careful with where we put the bombs so that they don't accidentally hit women and children and stuff like that. I think it was right. I don't know anyone that's going to go and drop a bomb in a village because that's not doing anything for the war effort. Do I get the targets military important? Well, it was on the 13th of September, we were flying a bombing mission North Vietnam. We just discovered a bunch of missiles on transporters. Just finished dropping ordnance on them. We're looking for something that strayed and found a flank site. And we decided to make a pass. And I took a direct hit from me, 37 or 57. Called I was hit, leading near my radio transmission because number 4 man thought I was a missile. Told me I was a SAM. And the number 3 man said, no, that's 2, he's on fire. And I got about a minute and 10 or 20 seconds flying down out of the aircraft, got about 40 miles away from where I was hit. And we had a minor explosion whilst I got in pressure. The aircraft pitched down. And I ejected, almost uncontrolled situation. About 545, 550 knots, 2 negative G's, that's when I hurt my ankle. Caught my foot. The ejection process getting out. Everything else was uneventful after the chute opened. Down landed in the trees. Got my radio out, talked back to the flight. And they said the rescue aircraft was on the way. It took you about 45 or 50 minutes to get to me, and about 5 or 6 minutes to pick me up.
Well, that's good. You get up in the 90s and you got 10 to go and you say, well, I'm going home pretty soon, so I got to tell these guys something. So you go lay in bed at night and you think of things to tell them. And the runs, wait a minute. I'm not telling you guys something right now. This is my speech that I'll be I have a 3-hour speech prepared. And something I'm damn glad to have, besides working with all you guys with your names here. I don't really need this picture frame or do a what's the name? I'm gonna remember you guys.
But, yeah, I remember this because those are guys you remember, the guys you fought with.
This is an F-105G, the Wild Weasel variant of the Thunderchief. The last mutation of a plane that when first produced was the biggest single-engine, single-seat fighter aircraft ever built. The F-105 was an awesomely powerful weapon, and in the skies of Vietnam, it was to become known as the one-man Air Force. The designer of the F-105 was Alexander Catvelli, chief designer at Republic and no stranger to the concept of big fighter aircraft. For he had been the designer of the World War II P-47 Thunderbolt, the biggest single-engine fighter of its day, which has been produced in large numbers and had proved itself a sturdy workhorse not only in its intended role as an air superiority or escort fighter, but as a fighter bomber in the tactical support mission. Work on Advanced Project 63, the series of design studies that led to the 105, commenced in 1951, at the height of the Korean War. Essentially as a privately funded update of Republic's F-84. The 84 had been developed as a jet Thunderbolt for the escort and tactical fighter bomber roles. In Korea, it proved not up to the escort role in competition with the MiG-15, but it performed well in the ground attack. The 84's straight wings were part of a very conventional overall design. And indeed, the plane's latter manifestations exhibited swept wings more appropriate to the potential speed of the jet. But with the experience of Korea to guide them and the rapid pace of technological development to compel them, the design team soon realized that they were setting out to design a completely new plane. As a team at Republic was setting out on their project, the counterparts of North American company had just received U.S. Air Force support for the F-100 Super Sabre. First of the series of planes known as the Sentry Fighters that were to cover the multiple fighter roles that perceive as the Air Force moved to supersonic capability. Starting life as a reworking of the successful F-86 Sabre, the F-100 was originally described as an air superiority fighter, but its latter variations added fighter bombing capabilities. With a maximum speed of 860 miles an hour, the Hun was USA's first supersonic fighter, and, particularly in tactical support role, was to prove valuable in Vietnam. The next plane was the McDonnell F-101 Voodoo, designed as a penetration fighter and escort fighter. The rapidity of development in aviation can be judged by the fact that, though only ordered 12 months later than the F-100, the 101 had a top speed of 1,100 miles an hour. Again, the plane developed tactical capability in its later models, and it was used extensively in Vietnam, most notably in photo reconnaissance. Third of the Century fighters was the F-102 Delta Dagger from General Dynamics, an all-weather interceptor commenced in 1950. Capable of 820 miles an hour, it proved only a moderate success, but naturally was to develop to become the F-106, which had a top speed of 1,500 miles an hour. The Lockheed Starfighter, the F-104, ordered in March 1953, sought flight performance at all costs as an air superiority fighter. Basically a manned missile, the 1,400 mile per hour 104 had a checkered career, but has demonstrated amazing longevity as a tactical strike and reconnaissance aircraft. At Republic, Clark Belley's team working on Advanced Project 63. After a program that ran to 108 configurations had emerged with a design for a single-engine, single-seat tactical fighter bomber with the capacity to carry nuclear weapons in an internal bomb bay. This plane, the 105A, was given Air Force approval in September 1952, originally with the intention of mass production, but in the end only 2 were built. The 105, rounding out the Sentry fighters, was the first purpose-designed tactical strike aircraft ordered for the United States Air Force. The perception of need for such a plane derived from a combination of Korean battlefield experience, geopolitics, and interest-service competition between the strategic and tactical air commands of the USAF. For TAC, the 105, in addition to opening up parameters of their new conventional role, brought with it the capability to carry nuclear weapons over a long range, with a corresponding rise in their prestige to rival that of the Strategic Command. The Tactical Air Command support of the 105 was to prove vital to the project as the plane went through its difficult early years. Virtually all the technology and engineering of aircraft were being revolutionized at once, in response to the myriad physical changes inherent in the transition of the age of supersonic flight, and the F-105 was to have plenty of developmental problems in the years ahead. But what made the huge fighter so special was its large internal capacity. The atom bombs, more reminiscent of drums than weapons, gave it a potency far beyond any competitor. For the F-105A, significant breakthroughs in understanding the effects of transonic drag, together with some inherent deficiencies, had already seen the design superseded. It first flew for the 3 years after the USAF go-ahead, and then by then its internal systems had changed beyond recognition. Also by then, manufacture of its replacement was underway. The third F-105 was the first of the B model. We see it here on the 26th of May 1956 as it taxis to its takeoff point for its first flight. This was the first 105 to have a power plant big enough to match its size, and major external changes had also been incorporated, chief among which was the area ruling, which had rescued the F-102 from its drag and turbulence problems. This had replaced the straight lines on the A model with a slim hip over the wing. A massive 4-pedaled air brake now dominated the previously clean lines of the engine exhaust, and there had also been changes made to the air intakes, giving the Thunderchief its characteristic nostrils. A larger tail area had increased stability. These and other changes have resulted in a plane with the capacity to double the speed of sound. Perhaps symbolically, this first flight was to be beset by almost fatal problems. It was intended that the flight be short, little more than a quick circuit. But when it came time to lower the wheels, there was no response from the nose wheel. Raising and lowering the wheels had no effect. The nose wheel would not budge. Rather than abandon the plane, it was decided to attempt a wheels-up landing, and so the test pilot set the machine down on a long, dangerous slide across the salt. Eventually, the plane came to a halt, and emergency crews converged on the site in the slowly clearing dust. The crash was more than an intense embarrassment for a project that was already being scrutinized as excessively expensive and troubled by technical problems. However, it was still possible to argue that the problems were being solved in ways that consistently improved the overall capability of the plane. And that even as simply as a test program, the 105 was revolutionizing the understanding not only of the science of aviation, but the potentiality of a tactical aircraft. The cause of the crash was soon identified in the new air intake controls, which at the high thrust settings were jamming the wheel in a position, a fairly simple thing to correct. One other thing that the crash demonstrated was something that those who flew the Thunderchief in action came to know and approve of its toughness. The plane was lifted, the undercarriage was lowered, and the prototype was towed away to be mended and rebuilt. Rebuilt, the plane rejoined the test program. As work progressed on tying together all the systems and ironing out all the bugs in the components, the engineers were dealing with concepts and forces they could only barely control, and overcoming the snags as they appeared. It's difficult to think of any other way that these problems, theoretical and practical, could have kept up with the intense scramble of technical development. In being the first plane capable of both air-to-air fighting and air-to-ground semi-automatic weapons delivery, the plane relied on avionics packages far in advance of anything previously attempted. Among these advanced facilities were radar models for air search, contour mapping, terrain following, and automatic tracking of air and ground targets even in blind conditions. Throughout its life, the 105 was to almost constantly receive new and updated facilities, but even from the first, this was a plane that was far ahead of its time. The rebuilt plane was allocated to conduct the spin testing program, a spin recovery parachute which installed on the tail of the plane. This required removing a panel to afford room for the chute and removing the air brake so that, if needed, the chute would be unimpeded. Trials on the chute demonstrated that it worked satisfactorily. The aim of spin testing is to ensure that the plane can be recovered from a spin to normal flight. That, once control has been lost, it can be regained. Of course, the first thing to do in such a test is to lose control of the aircraft deliberately. Then, the test pilot sits there while his plane plummets through the air for a specified duration, and then he attempts recovery. This is not for the faint-hearted. The emergency spin recovery parachute was not needed, as the planes proved to have a natural tendency to level out after each revolution, and the pilots were able to resume control fairly easily. However, the airframe still had to be tested, and so the trials went on. 47 times the pilots let go and watched the horizon slide away slickingly as the plane commenced its fall. If you look carefully here, you'll see a pillar of flame leap from the tail of the plane as the engine stalls. Though the flight test proceeded well, the technical problems persisted. With the engine and the avionics still unreliable, the uncertainty of performance was matched by a wider uncertainty about the future of the plane. The original expectation of large production had been amended to 37, then cancelled altogether in December 1953. A reinstated order in February 1954 was for 15 aircraft. But by September, this had already come back to 3. In October, it was back to 6. Parallel for this state of flux, the operational requirements for the new fighter had already been repeatedly amended before being first published in December 1954, and, by April 1955, had been changed 3 more times. The men conducting the test series went on with their work, while uncertainty continued to shroud the future of the project. The 105's already considerable range had been augmented by the addition of external fuel tanks, and these two had to be tested to establish the effect they had on the plane, as well as to test the tanks themselves. Throughout 1957, the testing went on, with the test aircraft logging many hours over the desert as the plane was slowly sorted out through multiple modifications. The pre-service evaluations due for completion in November 1959 were to eventually go on until March 1961. Of the specifications added in 1954 was that the F-105 should be capable of in-flight refueling, another recent innovation already being widely used. With an airplane like the F-105, this was a tricky proposition. For the fighter pilot to slow down to the same speed as the tanker left him with insufficient airflow over the wings to maintain lift. The top speed of the tanker and lowest speed of the F-105 were very close, and, as you see, the fighter becomes very hard to maneuver, especially in the turbulence of the larger plane, and often stalls entirely. Attempts to alleviate the problem by handing jets to the tankers, as here to a B-29, didn't help all that much. All supersonic fighters had trouble until jet tankers raised the speed of refueling to safer levels. The test confirmed the difficulty for the pilot of the fighter, and although successful couplings were made, the system remained largely impractical. not due to any failure of the F-105, but because of the inadequacies of the tankers. Having the drogue trail from the wingtip rather than from the tail of the plane removed the operation from the worst of the larger plane's turbulence, and facilitated matters somewhat, but the tendency to stall still remained. The equipment in use, the long drogue hose, did not make things any easier with the requirement for the pilot of the fighter to maneuver onto the drogue. Not until this necessity was replaced by a system where he simply holds position in relation to the tanker and the operator in the tanker directs the connection was refueling truly a practical affair. The F-105 was equipped with two types of refueling connectors, and these were to see a lot of use in the Thunderchief's career. Back at the end of 1954, our public must have been wondering about the fate of the 105, and their anxiety can have only been slightly alleviated by the bittersweet news that they received in February 1955. The order was lifted back to 15, with the allowance for the rest of the original 34 only if funds were available in the coming fiscal year. To add to this ambiguous news was the unsettling proviso that there'd be a fly-off against the North American company's F-107, an updated, high-powered, and re-eclipsed Super Sabre variant. Had the 107 been compared to almost any other plane at the time, it may have outperformed it. However, the 105 was a rather special opponent, and the performance of the controversial big plane was beginning to quell the doubts about its worth. The revisions of the Thunderchief specifications had continued in a stream of expansions of its system's capability. Constant electronic elevations proceeded throughout the plane's development and its operational lifetime, continuing to maintain the F-105 at the forefront of performance. The plethora of design changes meant that the first 15 F-105s produced represented 5 distinct subtypes. Eventually, there would have been 19. During the test program, of course, the revisions of the plane meant that the trials were regularly extended. The normal flight testing programs were consistently completed with little trouble, as the airframe behaved very well and had admirable flight characteristics. However, the electronics of the newly conceived and developing systems caused continuing delays as their performance was lifted to their supposed specifications. With the benefit of hindsight, we can appreciate what a fine aircraft was evolving in the process. But at the time, eyebrows were being raised as there was considerable skepticism about the plane. On the 28th of May 1958, 3 years later than originally expected, the USAF took delivery of its first operational 105. Fittingly, it was the only one of its subtype. The Air Force pilots had been disappointed to hear that their new mount was in fact a rather large bomber, and had christened the plane in advance rather disparagingly as the lead sled, Thunder Thud, or Plane Thud. Now, they got their hands on it for the first time and immediately changed their minds, and Thud in particular came to mean F-105. but no longer in any derogatory sense. The big plan was to be universally popular with those who flew them. Not only did it handle and perform as a fighter, but it packed a combination of punches that was truly awesome. Fully laden, a 105 could carry 14,000 pounds of a very wide range of external stores, including all normal bombs, rockets or rocket pods, cannon pods, electronic countermeasures, packed air-to-surface missiles, and Sidewinder air-to-air missiles. But almost as the reason for its existence, the Thunderchief also had a bomb bay. To minimize supersonic drag, the bomb bay doors retracted neatly into the plane. To control the ejection of the bomb, both for accuracy's sake and to ensure the bomb was clear of the aircraft, it was pushed down with a pneumatic rack. The rack was strong enough to be used as a jack to load the bay if there was no bomb trolley available in wartime operations. However, the Thuds carried very few bombs internally. Most of the time, the bomb bay was occupied by a further reserve of fuel on the outer wing. There was a provision for 2 stores pylons to be fitted. These could be used to carry weaponry and fuel in any desired combination, or removed to allow the attachment of specialized delivery racks for other armaments, like this installation for the Sidewinder. The standard build and armament for all Thunderchief variants was a General Electric M61 20mm multi-barrel gun. This gun fired at 6,000 rounds per minute and could fire off the entire 1,029 shells it carried in less than 11 seconds. Air Force deliveries continue with the 335th Tactical Air Squadron, becoming the first fully equipped with the new fighter and celebrating by setting a world speed record. In 1961, the first overseas deployments were made to bases in Germany. Far away from Europe, the summer of 1964, so the Thud goes into action for the first time. Soon, they were sporting new camouflage as they were deployed in larger numbers to bases in Thailand and South Vietnam. From those bases, they launched the campaigns that were to write their name into history. For the F-105, Vietnam was the right place at the right time. Even during their service life, up to that time there had been continued problems with reliability, and as recently as 1962, they had all been grounded. Though those problems had been ironed out, the plague of minor defects and a series of accidents had continued almost up to their first Vietnamese missions. But the Thuds in Vietnam were to earn a completely different reputation as reliable and duro airplanes. They also earned a fearsome reputation as weapons. The importance of the Thunderchief in Vietnam can be simply indicated during the first 5 years of their involvement there. They flew an amazing 75% of all USAF attack missions. If the skies of Vietnam were full of bombs, it was because the Thuds put them there. From March 1965, increasing numbers of airstrikes were made on North Vietnam, predominantly directed at communications targets. The raids relied almost entirely on the F-105s. The planes would heave themselves into the air with their loads of bombs and head for a rendezvous with a tanker near the North Vietnam border. But with the level of external stores they were carrying, and the way that increasingly they had to fly flat out all the way across Vietnam rather than cruising to and from the target, the range had been cut considerably, and even with full tanks, the journeys didn't leave much to spare. Then, they flew into hostile airspace. At the beginning of the war, the North Vietnamese had only limited air defenses, and the earliest raids were relatively quiet. Soon, however, supplies on anti-aircraft artillery, surface-to-air missiles, and MiG fighters began to multiply, and the raids were flown into the teeth of the most intensive air defense systems ever tested in warfare at that time. Production of the 105s had been completed in December 1964. Only 78 of the B model had ever been built. The remaining 610 had been F-105Ds. The D had acquired an extended nose, accommodating all-weather navigation systems, and thus was externally dissimilar to the B. The other 143 with a twin-seat F model. It had always been expected that there would be a twin-seat version of the plane, but 2 earlier twin-seat proposals had been dropped. The Fs were to provide the stock for the later development of the last 105, the G, the Wild Weasel. The workhorse of the bombing raids was the D. The single-seaters are bounded on the bases where the work of war went on 24 hours a day. At the end of each mission, the returning pilot would confer with his crew chief about the performance of the plane and handed it over to him for service. The service record of the F-105s in Vietnam was excellent. On any given day, over 90% of the funds were ready for work. This figure was higher than the overall average within the USAF, and considering the complexity, workload, and relative scarcity of the big planes, it's all the more outstanding to keep them in the air. Facilities for total maintenance of the planes were built at the bases they flew their missions from, and specialist teams were constantly available to fly in to handle specific problems. Teams of ground crew at the bases carried out the normal turnaround routines, like refueling, filling the water tank in the tail for the afterburner, rearming the plane, and other servicing required between missions quickly and efficiently. The body of the plane was a patchwork of hatches, allowing access to the equipment inside. The big fuselage had very little spare room inside it, but the layout was good enough to ensure that servicing was relatively straightforward. The bases were a far cry from the mud and improvisation of the Second World War. A Thunderchief parked on Tackley's acres of hearthstand could be serviced with relative ease. The wing point combinations for the next missions were selected and affected, and the plane armed in the smooth and practice routine. A large part of the bombs that were dropped on Vietnam were iron bombs of the Second World War. Vintage, sadly, they were a part of a design philosophy and era that should have been long gone. However, modern smart bombs were not to really arrive in Vietnam until the F-111s used them in the last phases of the conflict. So the F-105 missions were often flown to deliver hardware that was uncontrolled in flight, often unstable in trajectory and sometimes unreliable in effect. But with these bombs, the Thuds hammered the North and in most instances destroyed their allocated targets right through the night. The bases were a hive of activity. At the work of repairing, servicing, and arming the planes went on. Another factor that makes the 90% availability of the Thuds even more impressive was their toughness. They kept coming back from missions with major battle damage to repair. Thuds sustained strikes from SAMs as well as AAAs and mid-cannons and still survived. This one has actually survived a hit from a Sidewinder. Each morning, the one man's air forces waited ready. In March 1965, the USAF flew the first of the Rolling Thunder series of strikes. The inclusion of the reference to Thunder is fitting, as throughout its 3 years, Rolling Thunder was to be the almost exclusive province of the Thunderchief. The fuller extension of the air war into the north had 3 purposes. First, to reduce the infiltration of the south. Second, to give pause to the communist leadership in Hanoi. And thirdly, to bolster the morale of the southern leadership and the people of South Vietnam. As the name implies, the strikes rolled forward into the north, targets being progressively further and further over the border, and the thunder was real. The damage to the North's bridges and railways and roads extracted a great cost on the communists and hampered their war effort considerably. However, though at times apparently shaken, the Hanoi leadership did not break. The Thuds flew in on their deadly missions, and the Vietnamese tried with everything the Russians and Chinese could give them to knock them from the sky. North Vietnam was not an ideal target for a sustained bombing campaign. There was little industrial infrastructure to damage and almost no war production. The country had an agrarian society, predominantly rural and dispersed. The few major targets in the terms of docks and storage were within the exclusion zones around Hanoi and Haiphong, the two major cities. For political reasons, these areas were not bombed for most of the war, as the US consistently tried to negotiate an end to the fighting. The Thud pilots learned their own ways of coping with the streams of sands that rose of them, splitting and diving to confuse and evade the missiles. In tangles with the MiGs, the 105s came off well. They had such reverse of power that if a MiG managed to get in position to fire, they could in most cases simply accelerate away from them further. The Thuds were capable of turning the tables on their attackers and really mixing it up. 28 MiG-17s were down by 105s. The bombs continued to rain down on Vietnam. Supporting the bombing was an electronics and communications network of unprecedented technical sophistication. Operations controllers directed a huge fleet of varied craft in the air at enemy level, from artillery spotter planes to B-52s. They dispatched rescue operations for downed pilots and coordinated the activities of tankers, bombers, and fighters. Off the coast of North Vietnam prowled the Big Eye planes packed with sensitive radar and alert for the slightest activity from the mid-squadrons. Any appearance of the MiGs was monitored and the information relayed to the fighters in the area. The constant observation, coupled with the air superiority of the Phantoms and Thunderchiefs, served to ensure that for the large periods of the war, the Communist Air Force stayed on the ground, pragmatically accepting that they could not compete. The controllers and their equipment directing the airstrikes were themselves part of a chain of command that stretched back from the Vietnam through the Pacific headquarters in Hawaii all the way to Washington, where the targets were identified and authorized. At the very end of the chain were the Thuds, sending off daily with their loads. Thousands and thousands of sorties succeeded one another, with the F-105s carrying most of the load. Whether or not one questions the strategic effect of the program, it is impossible to not acknowledge the burden that the Thunderchiefs carried and the effectiveness with which they pursued their assignments. In June 1967, the first of the Thuds to do so reached the halfway point in their theoretical 4,000-hour fatigue lifetime, to be followed soon by others. The most critical fatigue concern was the strains upon the engines. The missions that the Thuds were flying were unlike anything originally envisaged. They were regularly returning at full power with afterburner for extended periods of time. The stress on the power plants was enormous. The hot sections of the huge J-75 engine were particularly vulnerable to this type of treatment. Already, there had been some shortages of spares. As a safeguard, their normal engine life between changes was reduced from 200 to 125 hours. And teams of mechanics worked on overhauling the engines, testing them and reinstalling them on the planes. By August 1968, the 388th Squadron was flying Thunderchiefs with 3,000 hours under its belt. Having gone out on 500 missions, received flag damage on several occasions, and have been involved in mid-air collision earlier in the year. By October, 3 more had passed the mark. They were growing old fast. An earlier suggestion to reopen the lines and build more F-105s had been considered, then dropped. There was a replacement for much of the work already available in the Phantom, and construction was proceeding apace on their successor, a design that had been much influenced by the story of the Thud and which had reflected many of the lessons learned in its combat life, the F-111. For the time being, the Thuds remained indispensable, and they were constantly tended to maintain their status and prolong their life. The Thuds remained in Vietnam to the end. Not only the two-seater SAM suppressing Wild Weasels, but also the Ds and Fs with their bombs, tactical support, and electronic countermeasure systems. The Thuds were still workhorses right through to the devastating Linebreaker 1 and 2 operations that finally brought the North to a negotiation position that allowed the US to withdraw from the conflict. Their bombing had sustained the air war against North Vietnam. There was no other plane at the time that could have done the job. The bombing was fiercely pressed home, and the results devastating, particularly when they were directed against a specific industrial target, as here on this truck maintenance depot. The Ho Chi Minh Trail buzzed with activity during the bombing halts, with trucks bumper to bumper, illustrating 2 points: the wily resolve of the Vietnamese in pursuit of their aims, and the effectiveness of bombing. With Thuds about, the trucks were far more circumspect. The pilot's tour of duty was 100 missions, and the Thuds saw hundreds of pilots through their tour and home again. They were men who were undoubtedly universally glad to be out of the war, glad to have done their job and survived. However, many of them were still to miss their big machines and the sensation of howling through the air at a huge metal monster at twice the speed of sound. Captain John Piowani began growing his mustache when he first arrived in Vietnam in 1967. When he finished his 100th mission, the mustache was 12¼ inches long. On his 55th mission, his Thud was hit by artillery over the Paul Duma Bridge near Hanoi during a bombing run. His story is typical. Not only did he hit the bridge and bring down a span, but the damaged Thud brought him home to finish his tour. Some of the Wild Weasel and other specialist planes stayed with the USAF after Vietnam, but the 105s were progressively phased out and retired into the hands of the pilots of the Air Force Reserves. There were not too many of them about, and they faded rather quickly from use. The last reserve of an F-105 was on the 25th of May 1983. exactly 25 years after the accident on the first flight of the 105B. Many pilots sat in the seat of an F-105 and went through the startup process. Many owed their lives to them. Most of them consider their plane the best in the inventory. The big fighter grew from its problem childhood, and the parameters of what an aircraft could be asked to do grew with it. In an era of multiple transitions, it is an astounding achievement that so much was got right so well in one package. There were never that many of them, and their reputation is perhaps not widespread. Nevertheless, the plane was certainly outstanding.
The guys were walking around at Nellis with this 100 mission patch, and I really wanted that 100 mission patch. It was one of those goals that I had is to get that 100 mission patch. And so when I got to Yokota, I went down to personnel and I volunteered for Southeast Asia. And I didn't have a clue at this time. I was the only one that had volunteered to go to Southeast Asia. So in May, I think it was April or May of '67, and like this was right following those DART missions that I had. They got an order to send 5 guys TDY from Yokota to Takali Air Base to fly combat mission. I was just a lieutenant, and I was the first one called up because I was the only one with a volunteer statement. And so then, of course, there's a lot of guys who wanted to go. They just hadn't thought about putting in a volunteer statement. And so, anyway, they filled up real quick. So 5 of us went down, and we went to Takali, and I wound up going to the 357th Squadron. It was the 355th Wing at Takali, and the 357th Squadron. And got to fly with some really, really great guys. And then this is where the rubber meets the road, as the saying goes. And once again, this is where my 6 months of experience with the 105 really, really, really paid off. Because I knew the airplane extremely well. Because like I said, Spiels had pushed me. So I was able to assimilate into that role pretty quickly and effectively. Nobody had to worry about where I was. I was always going to be where I was supposed to. I was going to do what I was supposed to do. And because I knew the rules and I knew why the rules were there. And that's part of the training that I had gotten. And so started flying. The first 10 missions you fly, they get you easy missions, the lower route packs, or I even had some Laos missions, which we weren't in, but I had some Laos missions anyway. Then you start flying Route Pack 6. Now, Route Pack 6 was not a friendly place to be because they had more guns, missiles than anything from what I've been told by the old heads that we ever faced. And the flak sometimes would really be horrendous. But one mission, it was sort of interesting, actually, because when I first started flying the Pac 6 missions, the guns were quiet. I couldn't believe it. We'd roll on the target. I was expecting all this stuff to come up, nothing. And then July, I think 4th or 5th came along, And we're going against Kep Airfield. And I'm flying, I think, in the second flight. Bob White was leading. He flew with our squadron, actually, and he was leading the force in against Kep Airfield, which is on the Northeast Railroad, which is northeast of Hanoi. That's why they call it the Northeast Railroad. And anyway, we roll in, and all of a sudden, I see something I hadn't seen before, and these red streaks were going by my cockpit. And it took a little bit for me to realize that's flak. It hadn't gone off yet. That's the flak going up. And then this horrendous explosion took place right underneath me. And I mean, it literally, I'm in a 45-degree dive, and I was doing 550 knots. It literally, it was like somebody took you and hit you in the back as hard as you could. And it's just, I mean, the whole airplane just completely just moved, and it rolled me upside down. Here I am going straight 45 degrees down at the ground, upside down now, and I thought I'd been hit. I mean, there was no doubt in my mind that I'd been hit. And I checked my gauges real quick, and this is where, knowing the airplane, everything felt solid. And so I kept the roll going, and I rolled it out. I checked the gauges real quick, and everything was still in the green. And so I continued, I dropped, came off the target, and I looked up and I saw a sight that I'll never forget. One of the guys on the first flight had been hit in the belly. We had a belly tank, and fuel was just pouring out, and he was a ball of fire all the way back. And give me a second. Anyway, I pulled up beside him, and he had a real high angle of attack, was climbing, and this fire was just pouring out of the back of his airplane. I pulled up alongside of him, and I didn't know for sure who it was, but I said, I'm out here to the left of you. I'm out to the left of you. You've been hit. Lower your nose. You got too high an angle of attack. You're going to lose it. Lower your nose. And the nose came down a little bit. And he said, it's getting sloppy. I heard him say it over the air. And I said, try to head a little bit, bring it over to the left more. And he said, I can't hardly see, it's too much smoke. I said, roll a little bit left, roll left. Trying to get him out to the sea. Try to get him out where he could have a chance maybe to get out of the airplane. And he sort of rolled, but then he said, I'm starting to lose it, I'm starting to lose it. And I said, well, don't get out of it before you lose it, because what would happen if you got an angle of attack in the 105? If you got a high angle of attack, the nose would just slam down like this, and then when you punch, you're off the seat, and that seat comes up and hits you, but it can really hurt you bad. So I was trying to keep, it was obvious he was going to bail out. So I said, get out of it before you lose it. Well, so anyway, he leaves the airplane. So I went back, I joined up the tanker, get home, and the crew chief, of course, they'd come up on the airplane and say, how'd it go? And I said, well, check the belly. I might have taken a hit. And he checked it. He said, yeah, there's a hole in the bottom of the airplane. And after that guy had gotten hit, 2 other guys got hit. So we lost 3 guys on that mission. And the guy that I tried to help was Ward Dodge, and he was basically my mentor when I showed up in the 357th Squadron. He's the one that taught me how to fly combat.
He was the son of a World War I pilot. His earliest memories were the sounds of aircraft starting in early morning. 2 years before the United States entered World War II, he tried to enlist in the RAF, but at 17 was too young. A year later, he went to West Point, where he played football and made All-American. He was one of the most natural fighter pilots his instructors had ever seen. A kid who seemed to meld with his plane into a single being. On his first combat mission, he shot down 2 German fighters. By the end of the war, he destroyed 13 German planes in the air and 11 and a half more on the ground. He sat out Korea, but in Vietnam flew more than 150 combat missions. He was a hard-drinking, hard-cussing officer who didn't bother to hide his contempt for the limits politicians had placed on the war.
I think he ruffled feathers and made people very, very uncomfortable, because often what he was saying was absolutely true and it was going against what people were expecting him to say.
He was nonetheless so well respected by the Air Force brass, they made him Commandant of Cadets at the Air Force Academy, in hopes that he would pass his passion and tactical brilliance on to the next generation of Air Force officers. He is Brigadier General Robin Olds, and he is a legend of air power. Robin Olds was born in 1922 in Honolulu, Hawaii. His mother died when he was 4 years old, and his life was dominated by his father, Major General Robert Olds, himself a flyer and a confidant of Billy Mitchell.
Well, his father, General Robert Olds, was one of the pioneers in military aviation, and Robin grew up with that background. He grew up with people coming to his house every night or, on weekends that were the pioneers of aviation when military aviation was just starting. So he got indoctrinated pretty early.
He spent most of his youth living on base in Langley, Virginia. His father played a prominent role in convincing a skeptical bureaucracy that the country needed to spend more money on combat aircraft. Olds remembers the uproar among flyers when President Coolidge asked, in all seriousness, why the Army didn't simply buy one airplane and let the pilots take turns flying it. But mostly what Olds remembers is growing up among the camaraderie of those early aviators in a world that seemed to him to revolve entirely around airplanes.
When I was a little boy, the first noises were engines of airplanes warming up pre-dawn. And I could tell one engine from the other, even when I was 4 and 5 years old, to my dad's delight. And I'd sneak down and watch the aviators, watch the pilots. And I remember once, years later, I ran into a fellow who had been a sergeant there at Langley, and he told me the story of going into a hangar once. There was one plane sitting in the hangar, and no one was around, but all the controls were moving. And he walked up to the airplane and looked in this open cockpit, and there I was, down in there. I was about 6 years old, working the controls for all I was worth.
While there was never any doubt that he'd end up a pilot, his father insisted he get a proper education. But when the Germans invaded Poland in 1939, Olds showed up at the Canadian embassy and tried to enlist in the Royal Air Force.
They laughed at me. Then we have to get permission, your parents' permission. So Dad had just moved to Washington. I went home, and he came home from work. He said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Dad, I want you to sign this piece of paper." Well, it took about a week to scrape him off the ceiling. And back in prep school I went. That was the end of that.
After graduating high school, Olds considered enlisting and trying to fight his way into the Air Corps. But the rules at the time made that route difficult. And, having watched reserve officers struggle to gain a regular Army commission, he opted instead for West Point. He had, he admits, a romanticized view of what his career would be like.
I'm going to go to West Point, and I'll have a regular commission, and I'll fly airplanes, and I won't have to work for a living. And so I went to West Point.
There, he says, he learned the most valuable lessons an officer can learn: to associate and trust the people around you, to take orders, and to ignore fun and games. He impressed his teachers with his drive and focus, which was also evident on the football field. He played tackle, and in 1942 made the All-American team. By then, of course, football seemed an almost irrelevant diversion. The Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor, and the United States was no longer dominated by pacifists who believed we could stay out of the war. Olds took his basic and advanced flight training at tiny Stewart Field, just north of West Point. From the first time he put his hands on the stick, he knew flying was exactly what he was meant to do.
You're the brains, you know, you're the blood. The aircraft are the muscles. And each explosion of a cylinder, each whirl of the prop, every movement of the aircraft translates itself into you through your body, and you react, or it reacts to you. You don't think, now I'm going to do this and pull back and go up there. You're there. You don't think about it. It's instinctive.
2 months before Olds graduated, his father died. Robert Olds was only 47 years old. The flyers he had grown up with were scattered around the world and could not attend the funeral. So Olds graduated from West Point an orphan. His family was the Air Corps his father had helped make, a force that had fought for its very existence while young Olds was growing up. It had flowered into a full-fledged strategic force, the only force in the early months of the war capable of striking significantly at the enemy. Olds learned to fly P-38s in Arizona and California. He and all his classmates were anxious to get overseas, to get into the battle and test themselves. But they were caught in what Olds refers to as a catch-22. The Army wanted the Academy graduates to go overseas as flight commanders, but didn't want to promote pilots to command who didn't have battle experience.
And once it really soaked in that we weren't going anywhere, my friend and I, Al Tucker, went down to the LA Fighter Wing headquarters, found a sergeant who said, "You guys really want to go to war?" I said, "Yep." He said, "Where do you want to go?" I said, "I want to go to England." He typed down. 20 minutes later, we had orders. So the moral of that is, if you want to get something done in the service, go to the sergeants.
Olds and his partner were off to England and the war. It took them less than a week to get there. Olds had never been so excited about anything in his life. Lieutenant Robin Olds arrived in England with the 479th Fighter Group in May 1944. In only a few days, he strapped into his P-38 and flew off with his squadron for a mission over occupied France. And there, the squadron flew around in circles, not bothering to attack anyone.
And I'm sitting up there getting more angry, cussing in my oxygen mask, looking down, there's train, there's trucks over here, the airfield there. And all enemy turn. This is prior to D-Day. Hey, why don't we do something?
After a few up and down missions, Olds and his wingman cooked up a scheme to get themselves into combat. While flying over the French countryside, Olds radioed his commander that he saw a moving train and was going down after it. "Roger," came the reply over the radio, and down Olds went. He made 2 passes at the train before his squadron arrived to back him up. And as he was swinging around for a 3rd pass, when an angry voice on the radio ordered everyone back into position at a safe altitude. Back at the base, the major in command of the mission confronted Olds, wanting to know why he had disobeyed orders by attacking the train.
"Sir, I called you. I said, this is New Cross lead. This is Blue 3. I got a train at 7 o'clock. I'm going down. Will you cover me?" And you said, "Roger." He said, "I didn't say Roger." You know what that's called? Gotcha. Gotcha. It was my wingman, and we had set it up.
While the strafing run on the train might technically have counted as Olds' first combat, his first air-to-air engagement occurred a few days later. Assigned a night mission, though they were not equipped with night fighters, Olds ended up separated from his squadron. Rather than returning to base, he continued on with the mission, flying alone toward a bridge in eastern France. He found the bridge just as dawn broke over the continent and was on his way back to base when he spotted a couple of planes on the far horizon.
And don't ask me to explain, but you know immediately, enemy. If something tells you enemy, 99.9% enemy, but that 1/10 of 1%, I cut them off through the field, came up underneath and behind, and there were 190s, two of them. So we went roundy round, and I shot them both down.
Because of a design flaw in the P-38 gun camera, Olds expected there wouldn't be definitive records that the dogfight had even taken place. He returned to base sure he was going to be in trouble for going on the mission alone, and decided not to even bring up the kills for fear that no one would believe him. Sure enough, as he climbed out of his plane, his commander was waiting for him on the ground. The commander was mad, but not very. A bomber flying high over the battle had reported the kills. On his next mission, his flight came upon a large group of German fighters bearing down on a group of American bombers.
So we pulled up behind them, and just as I was about to fire, both engines quit. Because in my excitement, I'd forgot to switch tank. I said, what the hell, I fired anyway. So I've always, all these years since then, laid claim to the fact that I'm the only fighter pilot in the history of aerial warfare that shot down an enemy aircraft while in the glide mode.
He got his engine started again and returned to battle. He got 2 more kills that day. In only 2 air-to-air engagements, Robin Olds had shot down 5 enemy aircraft. He was officially a fighter ace. He was quickly promoted, first to captain and then to major. By the end of the war, he was one of the most famous pilots in the world. A dashing hero with an outsized personality and a total of 24.5 kills, 13 in the air, the remainder German aircraft on the ground. Not long after the war ended, Olds was summoned to Supreme Air Force headquarters in France. When he got there, he was shown into a room that was filling with what Olds refers to as a book of heroes of the war. Generals, Medal of Honor recipients, half the staff of the Supreme Allied Command. All were awaiting the arrival of their host, General Karl Tui Spatz. Spatz had been an old friend of Olds' father, a pioneer military aviator who had been in charge of American air operations in the European theater. When he walked into the room full of heroes, Spatz greeted Olds first. Before he spoke with anyone else, he ushered the 22-year-old major into a side room for a private chat about Olds' father and the young officer's career.
Gave me some advice for the future about me firsters, me tours, Deadwood, dedicated people, you know. Then he said, look, here's, and he pulled out a wad of francs. He said, here's about $500 I won off poker from those fellows out there at the other. He said, my car is waiting for you out front. Go into Paris and get lost, which I did.
After the end of World War II, the Army Air Force took its rakish, heroic fighter ace and assigned him to coach football at West Point. Robin Olds reported as ordered, but wasn't happy with the assignment. Thankfully, it lasted only a few months, and then he was transferred to California to fly the Air Force's first combat jet, the P-80 Shooting Star.
It was like flying a jet-powered glider. Wonderfully acrobatic and agile, you know. No nav equipment. I mean, everything was still dead reckoning, but fun.
Olds helped form the Air Force's first jet acrobatic team, a precursor of the Thunderbirds that toured around the country, building the profile of the Army Air Force in support of making it into a separate branch of the military. He was flying a performance in California when his wingman, Pappy Hearst, failed to pull out of a dive and crashed.
And I wanted to land way down at the end of the field, but they made me taxi right in. There was a little lump of people. They didn't know which one of us. They just knew one had crashed. And I had my visor down, my oxygen mask on. I didn't want to get out of that airplane because his wife was standing in that little crowd. But finally, I put my head down, took my helmet off, and stood up and backed out. And I glanced over my shoulder. She was dead gone.
Olds reformed the group as a team of 4 and went on flying shows for the remainder of the airshow season. He also planned a flight from California to Washington, D.C. for lunch and back in a single day. He and his wingman got lost in clouds over West Virginia. When it seemed like enough time had elapsed, they dipped out of the clouds to see where they were. They were right over the Washington Monument.
We hadn't asked anybody's permission to do this or told anyone that we were going to do it, but the press got hold of us, so they were flight following us by telephone, you know? And the Pentagon heard about it, and they were furious, but, you know, especially the information people, because they hadn't been cut in on it.
The publicity stunt worked. The idea of flying so fast that you could cross the continent, have lunch, and be home for dinner captured the public imagination. In 1947, the Congress voted to make the Air Force a separate branch of the service. Olds missed the Korean War. He had recently married Ella Raines, a movie actress, and was convinced that she or powerful studio people she worked for pulled strings to keep him out of combat. He revamped gunnery training for the fighter forces in Europe, but was angry that he missed the war and came back, he says, with a chip on his shoulder. Assigned to the Pentagon, he started fighting what was then the prevailing wisdom that in a nuclear age, fighters were irrelevant.
Well, my boss, a 2-star general in the basement of the Pentagon, called me in one day and said, Robin, or Colonel Olds, said, I'm sick and tired of these studies you're forwarding to me about our lack of tactical air capability. I want you to understand, Colonel, and get it through your head. We are never again going to fight a conventional war.
That was in 1962, just about the time the first American Army forces were deploying into Vietnam. In 1966, Olds, then 44 years old, was angling for a combat assignment when he got what might, in other circumstances, have been good news. He was on the list for promotion to general.
Now what am I going to do? I don't want to be a general, because the war was just heating up over there in Southeast Asia, and I missed Korea. I was damn well not going to miss this one.
Olds' only option was to find a way to get himself off the promotion list. To that end, he staged an impromptu, low-altitude aerobatic demonstration just outside of London. Sure enough, Olds' commander called him in.
He pulled out a piece of paper, waved it in my face, said, you can't see this, but that says you'll never be promoted. I think now we're getting somewhere. Then he waxed really furious and eloquent, and finally he shook his finger at me in an utter rage. And he said, and you are the kind of Air Force officer that ought to be in Southeast Asia. And I jumped up and saluted him and said, thank you very much, sir. And walked out of the room. And he was still shouting at me.
Colonel Robin Olds, at the tender age of 44, was sent to command the 8th Tactical Fighter Wing based in Thailand. On the way over, he stopped off to see his old friend, fighter pilot Chappie James.
I overheard them talking, and he was offering my father a position in his wing in Thailand. He said, oh, really? You're going to Thailand? He says, yes, if you come over, you can be my operations guy. You can be the deputy commander for operations. And then when Colonel Garrison goes home, you can be the vice commander. What do you think about that? And he said, well, that's fine, but that wing is primarily a reconnaissance wing. He says, nope. He said, that's all going to change.
Olds arrived, and James wasn't far behind him. And the 8th Tactical Fighter Wing did indeed change.
He knew what he was getting into from his World War II experiences, and he knew the way the war was being fought in Vietnam, and he trained his people to fight that war, and he protected his people, which was a large part accounted for the success they had as a wing.
The two officers drilled their pilots in air-to-air tactics and demanded of them the same steely discipline they demanded of themselves.
And they became known as Black Man and Robin. And they shot down more MiGs in one day, more enemy aircraft in one day in the famous Operation Bolo MiG Sweep, as they called it, than any other organization did.
Olds flew an incredible 152 combat missions in Vietnam. He shot down 4 North Vietnamese planes, bringing his lifetime total to 17.
I asked him once whether he really had the rumored 5th MiG. And his quote was, and this is a quote, "I choose not to answer that question." And the reason for that is that he had been told that when he got the 5th MiG, and it looked like he was going to, that when he got the 5th MiG, they were going to bring him home. And Robin Olds is a fighter pilot, and he wanted to stay with his wing. He wanted to stay in the war, in the fight. And there has always been a suspicion he may have gotten the 5th plane. Nobody really knows but him, I guess.
He came home disgusted with the failure of his government, but inspired by the accomplishments of his men.
They were proud of themselves. They had every right to be. We were doing what we were told, and we were doing it well. And we admired, respected, loved one another. It was a very tight, wonderful unit. Still is to this day. No, nobody feels sorry for himself.
Olds returned to the United States in 1967 and took over as Commandant of Cadets at the Air Force Academy. There he became a living symbol of the Air Force, a direct tie between its origins in World War I, where his father served, and the era of missiles and laser-guided munitions.
He did have a major impact on a whole generation of fighter pilots who met him at the academy. He inspired a lot of people who would later go on and fight in the Vietnam War.
I loved being in the Air Force. I loved the responsibilities that came my way. I met them head on and with everything I possessed, given to the jobs that I had. I wouldn't change that for anything.
If you could take the genes from the consummate military leader and combine them with the genes of the consummate fighter pilot, the result might look just like this. However, if you created a fictional military hero with Brigadier General Robin Olds' resume, an editor would likely reject it for being beyond believable. In 1942, Olds was an All-American tackle for West Point. In 1943, he was commissioned a second lieutenant and completed pilot training. He entered World War II flying a P-38 he named Scat-1. As he progressed through different iterations of fighter planes, he simply kept adding Roman numerals to the Scat name. He finished the war in a P-51 named Scat-7. In addition to becoming a double ace plus with 12 aerial victories, he destroyed another 11 1/2 aircraft on the ground. He later became the wingman on the Air Force's first aerobatic jet team. In 1966, he became commander of the 8th Tactical Fighter Wing at Ubon Royal Thai Air Force Base, Thailand. Robin Olds flew 152 combat missions in Southeast Asia in F-4 Phantoms, 105 of them over North Vietnam. He shot down 2 North Vietnamese MiG-17s and 2 MiG-21s. Robin Olds was famous for something else. He never learned to mince words or play politics with the mission of the military, as those in the Warbirds in Review audience learned when Olds described his return from Vietnam.
I got home about the last day of September, 1st of October, on a Friday. My family in Washington. I'm on leave. Phone rang Saturday. Said, get over here to the Pentagon. Chief of Staff wants to see you Monday morning. I said, I'm on leave. He said, it doesn't matter. The chief wants to see you. I said, yes, sir. Okay. I reported into his office. He's the one that walked up to me and said, take off that mustache. Yes, sir. The next thing I knew, he briefed me, and I'm in the Oval Office of the White House. You know, God, me? LBJ was the president. So I'm sitting on the end of a couch. He's on an easy chair, and his aide, a colonel, Air Force colonel, was sitting on my right. And Mr. President said, welcome home, Colonel. You did well. Thank you very much, sir. Yeah, well, what's it like to be home? That was the weekend that thousands and thousands of hippies marched on the Pentagon. I said, sir, who are all those funny-looking people that marched on the Pentagon yesterday? And I'm going to quote for you folks. He said, I got 240,000 boys over there in Vietnam. When those boys come home, they'll tell the American public what's happening. And I thought, wait a minute. That's your job, not mine. Well, of course, you don't say that. So the best thing I could think of to come up with said, sir, I've been home since Friday, been to a couple of dinner parties. No one asked me where I've been or what I've been doing for the past year. In case somebody does ask, what would you like me to tell them? I'm thinking, end of career. He glared at me and then he said, well, Colonel, you tell them, I'm quoting, that we are preventing the North Vietnamese from interfering in the democratic process in South Vietnam. I said, I'm sorry, sir, I can't say that. Well, why not, Colonel? Well, sir, if that's why we're there, I don't want to be the one that spreads the word. It was grim for a few minutes, but I hand the man full credit. He let me talk. He listened. And he sent me down the next morning to talk to his chief security advisor in the basement of the White House. We argued for a couple of hours. But this security advisor and I argued. At one point I said something. He said, we can't do that. That'll bring down the Chinese. I said, the Chinese and the North Vietnamese have hated each other for a couple of thousand years. They fought wars against each other. Haven't you read their history? No, he hadn't. So finally he said, what do you think we ought to do? And I said, for God's sakes, sir, mine the harbors, because everything they used came in by ship bottom. Gas, missiles, ammunition, everything, food. His response, when I said mine the harbors, was, we can't do that. That's an act of war. And mind you, this was about the 2nd or 3rd of October of 1967. I wonder if he ever wondered what the hell we were doing over there. Now, it was, I maintain we had every reason to be there, but we went about it improperly under the leadership of McNamara and Johnson.
Sadly, Robin Olds passed away on June 14, 2007.
Across the Black River, the Red River, down the mountain chains to your target. So for the pre-strike, we went up. I said, Orange 5-6, this is Lincoln lead, tally ho. And this guy said, Lincoln, take the perch. And I said, what? He said, take the perch. Let me tell you what that told me. It told me this was a new guy from the States, probably his first mission, obviously out of SAC, following the rules. And I said, son, we don't take a perch around here. Just hold still. We'll be right there. What I didn't tell him was when we came up behind the tanker, each of us in F-4s is taking turns. It was unsafe, but we're making sure that the growl of the Sidewinder coincides with the sight picture, and the sight picture is his engines. He didn't know that. So we refueled, and everything's fine. Everything's fine. I stayed in a bit too long. Got in a fight with a bunch of MiGs, and I'm tapping the burners. Pretty soon I looked at the fuel gauge, and we are way below what we should have been. We had 3 bingos. Bingo. Hard bingo means you better get back to and then I can't say the word, but bingo. Which meant you better get to the tanker or you're in deep trouble. So I thought, Robin, you have really climbed deep in North 6. We never usually went out low. Fortunately, no SAMs. I called him, hey, Orange 5-6, head north. He says, Lincoln, I got to check with Brigham, ground. I said, Brigham is busy. Head north. I'll work the intercept, with the radar on the F-4. Well, finally, here he came. And I'm looking at my fuel gauge, and it's like this. My other 3 guys were low, but I was the worst. So we got the tanker, I turned him, plugged in, I relief. They finished. Now I came up for my full offload. Plugged in, he pulled the boom and stowed it. This is one of those big tanker birds. And I said, hey, give me some fuel. This pilot said, no, we're bingo, RTB, meaning he was low on his fuel, returning to base, RTB. I said, wait a minute. I'm going to have to bail out of this airplane in just a minute or two. Give me some fuel. No, we're bingo. And I said, I knew from reading his, method of operation, he could fly from where we were over northern Laos all the way to the south of Thailand, turn left, and go to the Pacific, go to the Philippines, and loiter for 20 minutes. That was his bingo. And my fuel gauge is like this. So finally I said, okay, I got one Sidewinder left. I'm going to drop back about 2,000 feet, and before I pull the ejection handle, I'm going to pull the trigger, so put your parachutes on. Boy, that boom came down. I plugged in. He started fueling me. My left engine quit. That's how low I was. I managed to hang on and get it started. He said, how much do you want? I said, fill it up. Which I didn't want because couldn't land with that much fuel. So I did a dirty trick, got my offload, pulled right up in front of him about 1,000 feet and hit the jettison switch. And got rid of half of that fuel. I said, you might need it. I said, sir, the MiGs are getting awful frisky, as you know. I have an idea of something we can do about it. He just grunted, and I thought, oh, well, end of that. But 5 days later, I'm in his office. He said, okay, what's your idea? I said, sir, I want to plan a mission where I'll take my F-4s up there and we look like 105s, because the MiGs love to tangle with the 105s. So we planned and planned and planned and planned, and pulled this mission off on the 2nd of January. Now the F-4, if you may have noticed, not in afterburner, but in full mill, leaves smoke trails. One factor. 2, a friend of mine named Donovan F. Smith in 7th Air Force said, Robin, I'm going to send you QRC 190s. Like you, what the hell is that? It's an ECM pod, a jamming emitter against their SAM sites, which the 105s had carried, but we never had. So there's a bit of deception. And then Mother Nature got in the act. Morning. Morning. Mother Nature got in the act and gave us a nice undercast so they couldn't see the smoke trails. So we did all this stuff, went down right over Fukien, nothing. Turned around just north of Hanoi, came back. My backseater says, I got one. Oops, went underneath. So I turned around and came back. Then here arrived my second flight. And the first transmission was, a lead, you got a MiG-21 on your ass. What a way to start a fight. but they all popped up through the clouds. They thought we were 105s, but we were loaded for bear, and we got 7 of them. Found out I heard a transmission of their radio chatter. The lead says, whatever the ground said, hey, these aren't 105s, these are Phantoms. What do we do? Well, there was great confusion. In the meantime, we're bang, bang, bang. That was fun. Yeah.
Another leading question, your interview with President Johnson. You're coming back to the States and
Do I have
President.
to? Do I have to?
No, sir, you don't have to.
Well, I will. We're talking about Vietnam, obviously. I got home about the last day of September, 1st of October, on a Friday. My family in Washington, and I'm on leave. Phone rang Saturday. Said, get over here to the Pentagon. Chief of Staff wants to see you Monday morning. I said, I'm on leave. He said, it doesn't matter, the chief wants to see you. I said, yes, sir, okay. I reported into his office. He's the one that walked up to me and said, take off that mustache. Yes, sir. The next thing I knew, he briefed me, and I'm in the Oval Office of the White House. You know, God, me? LBJ was the president. So I'm sitting on the end of a couch. He's on an easy chair, and his aide, a colonel, Air Force colonel, was sitting on my right. And Mr. President said, welcome home, Colonel. You did well. Thank you very much, sir. Yeah, well, what's it like to be home? That was the weekend that thousands and thousands of hippies marched on the Pentagon. Sir, and my daughter Chris had told me what hippies were. I said, sir, who are all those funny-looking people that marched on the Pentagon yesterday? And I'm going to quote for you folks. He said, I got 240,000 boys over there in Vietnam. When those boys come home, they'll tell the American public what's happening. And I thought, wait a minute. That's your job, not mine. Well, of course, you don't say that. So the best thing I could think of to come up with said, sir, I've been home since Friday. Been to a couple of dinner parties. No one asked me where I've been or what I've been doing for the past year. In case somebody does ask, what would you like me to tell them? I'm thinking, end of career. He glared at me, and then he said, well, Colonel, you tell them, I'm quoting, that we are preventing the North Vietnamese from interfering in the democratic process in South Vietnam. I said, I'm sorry, sir, I can't say that. Well, why not, Colonel? Well, sir, if that's why we're there, I don't want to be the one that spreads the word. Ooh. It was grim for a few minutes, but I hand the man full credit. He let me talk. He listened. And he sent me down the next morning to talk to his chief security advisor in the basement of the Pentagon, of the White House. And we argued for a couple of hours. How come he gets to fly it and I don't? But this security advisor and I argued. At one point I said something. He said, we can't do that. That'll bring down the Chinese. I said, the Chinese and the North Vietnamese have hated each other for a couple of thousand years. They fought wars against each other. Haven't you read their history? No, he hadn't. So finally he said, what do you think we ought to do? And I said, for God's sakes, sir, mind the harbors. because everything they used came in by ship bottom. Gas, you know, missiles, ammunition, everything, food. His response, when I said mind the harbors, was, we can't do that. That's an act of war. And mind you, this was about the 2nd or 3rd of October of 1967. I wonder if he ever wondered what the hell we were doing over there. Now, it was, I maintain we had every reason to be there, but we went about it improperly under the leadership of McNamara and Johnson. Yeah.
This is Marius Maxwell, Dr. Marius Maxwell. This is his airplane. This is actually the first time he's seen it in this paint job. And
it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. This is
you want to tell us a little bit about this particular airplane?
Oh, well, I really would just defer to Robin Olds. I agree with everything he says always. It's a lovely airplane, 1947 P-51, and it's Scat 6 now and henceforth, and that's about all there is to say.
Thank you. We'll open it up for questions. If do you have anything else you'd like to say before we open up for questions, General?
I think I've already said too much.
No, sir. You never say too much.
Anybody got a question? Yo.
Thank you. I may have missed it in the introduction. What was your involvement in Korea? Obviously, you were in World War II, got 13 kills, Nam, 4 more or more. What were you up to in Korea? Thank you.
I had a squadron of 86s. They're drawing pilots from us. My name headed every list, turned down every time. I never knew why. I blamed a colonel that I worked for. Took me 20 years to find out. My wife then was doing a television show in New York City. I mean, she was an actress. Her mother. The backer was a very powerful, wealthy man whose friend was the Secretary of the Air Force. The backer told the secretary, don't let him go. It took me 20 years to find that out. And I don't think you knew that, Chris. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Where? Somebody else of the P-38 pilot. They put aileron boost on the airplane later, but we never had it. But it would roll just as fast as you had to roll it under whatever circumstance. Matter of fact, I prided myself of being a pretty good P-38 pilot, and I could whip a P-51 down low. You know. Oh, a story about, this is kind of amusing to me. People often ask me, said, wasn't it wonderful to fly a P-38 with those 2 engines? And I said, boy, it sure was. I came home 5 times on single engine, all shot up. Love that bird. But you know the strangest thing? I flew another tour in P-51s. I came home single engine every day. Yeah.
General, you've had an incredible career flying a variety of different aircraft. What was your favorite aircraft that you flew over the years?
Well, I have to add the F-4, but the many years in between. I love that bird.
General Olds, just a quick question. In World War II, was your more feared adversary the 109 or the 190?
I didn't fear either one of them.
What was your preferred?
Don't get out in front of me. No, sir, I know you're asking a serious question, but, you know, in combat, you don't have time for that kind of analysis. You're fighting another human being, which you don't think about, another machine. And you try to anticipate what's he going to do next, which way is he going to go. So in a big fight, there's danger from being shot at. There's danger from collisions. Okay? Those are the 2 worst, as you know. You try to get your people to fight as a team, but it doesn't work. You're lucky if your wingman can hold on. It takes an extraordinary wingman to follow the violent maneuvers, and pretty soon you do get split up. And in World War II, we got split up almost every fight. You go home with one or two, or one. I never saw a 110 or a 410 except on the ground.
Next question.
I'm very. When you're engaged, do you ever watch the controls of the other aircraft that you're engaged with? That's how dumb I am. Okay.
Answer, no. Technically, maybe too far away. But combat-wise, you're anticipating his move, depending upon your relative position. I mean, if he's behind you, you can't see. You don't want that. If he's out here in a turn, God, if he turns back that way and you're trying to turn inside him, if he goes like that, you got him. So then it's who can turn the tightest, okay? So you don't really think that way. You know what he has to do. Well, it's like one day going in, you mind if I make a story out of this?
No, sir.
I was commanding the 81st Tactical Fighter Wing in England. Been there a year and a half. Been a colonel for a long time. Phone rang. Somebody from Washington. Almost whispered, "You're on the list," meaning I was going to be a general. This was 65. I didn't want to be a general. I wanted to go to Southeast Asia. I missed Korea. I'm going to go to Southeast Asia. What can I do? I can't tell the Air Force I don't want to be a general. They'll say, okay, fine, get out. I know. I'm going to make that boss of mine so mad, he'll take me off the list. He'll want to court-martial me. Then I can go to Southeast Asia. So I got 3 guys. We put on a formation acrobatic demonstration in F-101Cs. That's a single-seat bird. Sorry, excuse for wings. But I had done that sort of thing on the very first jet acrobatic team back in '46. I was wingman. So I kind of knew what I was doing. We put on a wonderful show. Bomb burst, the whole 9 yards. Well, my boss heard about it. I bet his missile badge burned him. So I was called down to London, chewed out, tore up my Legion of Merit. My effectiveness report was all wrong. He waved a piece of paper in my face and said, "And this says you'll never be a general." And I thought, oh, now we're getting somewhere. And he chewed and waggled his wattles at me. And finally, in the most disgusting voice, he said, "And you are the kind of Air Force officer that ought to be in Southeast Asia." And I jumped up out of the chair and said, "Yes, sir. Thank you very much, General." About face and left, and he's still shouting at me.
Got one more question over here, Robin.
Wait.
Oh, you're not done.
Told you it would be a long one. So we're going up the Gulf of Tonkin one day. I've got a backseater named Steve Croker. Turned inbound at Kep, headed for the Northeast Railroad. We got hit by about 16 MiGs. There were 8 of us. Roundy round, longest dogfight I was ever in. Got one early. Lead was doing figure 8s down. I could see him down below us. So I told everybody, get out, RTB, bingo. Made a circle to see if my guys got out. Then I left, and I thought about that guy. I said, nope, going back in. Went back in, about 25 feet. And there he is. Headed for his base, but there's a little range of hills. And I told the backseater, I said, Stevie, You watch him. He's got 3 choices. He can bail out, he can hit that ridge, or he can get over the ridge and give me some airspace and I'll get a Sidewinder. He chose the latter, Sidewinder, boom, down he went. I plugged into that tanker with 300 pounds of fuel left. Oh, now that was a disconnected story because I forgot why I was going to tell you about that goddamn general.
Sam, this gentleman's been patiently waiting over here, Sam, to your right.
Oh, okay.
First of all, I want to thank you for the service you give to our country. And I've always wondered about the 51 versus the ME-109. Could he outturn you, or could you outturn him in a dogfight?
Good. I hope you all heard the question. I wish I could answer that question. I honestly think it depended upon the pilot in the cockpit. The birds were fairly equal. It's
No. Was he? And then he died in France flying as a reconnaissance 38.
Yeah. He worked for a friend of mine. I'm sorry, what was the question?
General, please finish the story about the goddamn general.
It was a couple of years after that encounter, and I'm now a commandant of cadets at the Air Force Academy with a baby star up here, 1. And I'm talking to my old boss, 4-star General Spike Mohlmeyer, who was 7th Air Force Commander in Saigon. Another friend, 3 stars, then he was then commanding a training command, George Simler. Both of those gentlemen, of course, had spent their time in Southeast Asia. So while we were talking, here came the general from London that had chewed me out, waddling across the floor. And I said, excuse me, sir. Now, I know that both of these gentlemen had read my derogatory file because it's rather thick and good reading. And excuse me, sir. Oh, General Hardy, how nice to see you again, sir. You remember that magnificent chewing out you gave me there in Ruislip back in 1965? Oh, yes, sir. These 2, 4-star, 3-star, are kind of listening. I said, sir, you told me something that day that I've always wondered about. You said I was the kind of Air Force officer that ought to be in Southeast Asia. And I've wondered ever since, in your estimation, what kind of Air Force officer should not be in Southeast Asia. I thought Simler was going to fall on the floor laughing. And even Mohlmeyer laughed, which I'd never heard before. As General Hardy whirled about, red-faced, walked away, I reached between these 2 gentlemen and said, "Gotcha!"
All right, folks. Thank you for coming, and please stand up and give this true American hero a hand here.
I took a hit through the hinge on this door, and the door flew back like a flap. And I wonder, why won't the airplane go, And I'm dragging this thing just like a big flap. I got as far as Brussels, landed, saw what was wrong, had to take the door off. The hydraulic jack was bent, so I took it off, found a fitting on a wrecked airplane, and put the hydraulic lines together like this. Yeah, no, I'm just a pilot, okay? Filled it up with hydraulic fluid, took off, the gear handle wouldn't move. What I had done was but 1,200 PSI against each other. There wasn't much response when you tried to move something. I got back to base, my maintenance officer said, "What was your hydraulic pressure?" I said, He said, well, you do know where the gauge is, don't you? He said, it's down there right between you on the lower panel. I said, oh, is that what that is? Thank you all very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert.
If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching.
Aviation, the art of aeronautics, began with the dreamers, inventors and daredevils who dared to defy gravity. The journey of aviation was nurtured by pioneers like the Wright brothers, whose first flight marked a historic milestone. The role of aircrafts in world wars was groundbreaking, dramatically changing warfare strategies. This initiated a technological evolution in aviation, transforming the simplistic wings of a biplane into the thunderous roar of jet engines. Let's journey through the ages of aviation. Behind every great aircraft, there were great minds. These visionaries, like Sir Frank Whittle, the innovator of the turbojet engine, redefined air travel. Then there's Skunkworks Kelly Johnson, the genius behind the SR-71 Blackbird. His designs combined speed, stealth and power, crafting machines that dominated the heavens. The contributions of these pioneers have left an indelible mark on the canvas of aviation, shaping the course of history and inspiring generations of engineers and aviators. Each epoch in aviation history gave birth to extraordinary aircrafts, each with their own unique features and roles. The Lockheed SR-71 Blackbird was a marvel of speed and stealth. The F-105 Thunderchief, a supersonic fighter bomber, was vital in the Vietnam War. The P-51 Mustang, a long-range fighter, was critical in World War II. The P-47 Thunderbolt, a heavyweight fighter, was used extensively in the same war. The A-10 Thunderbolt II, the Warthog, is a close air support icon. The Messerschmitt Me-262 marked a leap forward in aviation technology. Each of these game changers were instrumental in their eras, and their legacies still resonate today. Beyond the game changers, there are those that have transcended their practical roles to become icons. The Concorde was not just an aircraft, it was a supersonic symbol of luxury and speed. The B-52 Stratofortress, a strategic bomber, is an icon of power and resilience. These magnificent machines and others like them have become much more than just aircrafts. They are enduring icons that encapsulate the audacious spirit, the relentless innovation, and the boundless ambition that define the world of aviation. For more amazing aerial footage, and to join us in this incredible journey, check out the DroneScapes YouTube channel.
If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching.